Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round your virgin mother and child. Oh, infant, so tender and mild.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome our friends in Gallup as well today. And say Merry Christmas. Again, want to invite everybody to come back on, Wednesday evening or Wednesday afternoon and join us for our candlelight Christmas service. So I have a friend I grew up with. His name is Nick. And actually, Nick was my preacher's son. And he and I went to school, I think, from like second grade all the way through graduation. And Nick is really good about being kind of one of those historian guys that posts old pictures on Facebook, but they're like team pictures and class pictures from our time in school together. And being that there was 15 in my graduating class, it kind of gives you an indicator everybody knew everybody. It was just one of those things that it is a reality of growing up in a small town. But occasionally he will post a class picture, and I look at the reality is probably 7 of the people I went to kindergarten with, I also graduated with. But every once in a while, there was that kid who floated through like for 6 months or a year, and they moved on, but they made it into the class picture. And so the face is vaguely familiar, but I don't know the name. The name just kind of escapes me. And actually, that's true of team pictures as well. Even though that was in high school, that was over 30 years ago, there are names, are faces that are vaguely familiar, and names that escape me. But I'm going to tell you that looking at team pictures for me is kind of a mixed bag. It's kind of one of those cool things. It's like a lot of memories come from playing sports and being on a team and different things like that. But when I see faces that are vaguely familiar and I don't remember their names, I realize that there's probably people looking at that exact same picture and they see my face and they go, "Now, who was that?" Yeah, I kind of vaguely remember that guy. But it's also kind of a mixed bag because when I look at a team picture for like football or basketball, I can look at the team picture and I can go, that dude was awesome. Like he was fast, and basketball he could shoot the lights out, he could throw the football a mile, he was a monster on the football field. Like certain ones of the team that always kind of rise to the top. Everybody remembers their accolades. Everybody remembers what they did. But you know what's happening or not happening when people look at a team picture and they see me? They are not saying that guy is awesome. They are not saying he was fast, he was a beast on the football field, he could shoot the lights out in basketball. They're probably saying, you remember that time that Brandon Shaffer played 2 minutes? They're not even saying that. See, I think about the genealogy of Jesus. Now, we're in this series, we're calling it Christmas or Mess, because Jesus came from a family tree that is an absolute hot mess. There's not really a person in the family tree of Jesus that doesn't make a mistake. But there are people like David, like Abraham, like Isaac and Jacob that we read their names. And if you've gone to church for a period of time or you read the Bible, you understand that they're headliners, especially Abraham and David. They're the headliners of the genealogy of Jesus. But then there are those that we know a little bit. We know some stories, but we don't know them as intimately as we know some of the headline stories of the Bible. And then there are names. especially the latter part of the genealogy of Jesus, all we got is names. We don't have the stories. We don't have, here's what kind of life they had, even if it were a paragraph. And so typically what we do when we read through like a genealogy, like Jesus' genealogy, his family tree, is we kind of look at that and we kind of get to David and maybe Solomon, and then we start reading a bunch of names and we kind of go, yeah, I'm out. These are just names that mean absolutely nothing to me because these are not the headline names and they don't have the headline stories. But today, I want to look at a name, a person, and a story that I think maybe ought to be a headline story. We don't typically preach a lot about people after we get to David in the Old Testament, and then we get to Daniel and we talk about Daniel, but everybody in between, kind of those king sort of people, they just don't get a lot of press. But I want to talk about a guy today, and we find his story in 2 Chronicles chapter 14. 2 Chronicles chapter 14, kind of maybe a third way through your Bible. It's going to be page 324 in the Bibles in the seats in front of you. And we're going to talk about a man by the name of Asa. But I want to go ahead and pop this up on here on screen as you're getting to 2 Chronicles. It says this in verse 7 of Jesus' family tree in Matthew 1. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the father of Abijah. And Abijah was the father of Asa. Asa was the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was the father of Jehoram. And Jehoram was the father of Uzziah. So with that, I want to take a look at King Asa here today. Now, by show of hands, how many of you have ever heard a sermon on King Asa? Probably, okay, so it'll probably get to the point like, yeah, this is kind of fuzzy to me. I've heard the name, I just don't know the story. And I actually believe that this is a great story. It's maybe a cautionary tale for you and I. It's one of those stories that it starts out not messy, and it ends in a mess. And so when we end a story in a mess, there's kind of a cautionary tale to be told here. But let's read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 14. It says, when Abijah died, he was buried in the city of David. Then his son Asa became the next king. There was peace in the land for 10 years. Asa did what was pleasing and good in the sight of the Lord his God. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and lay this out. In the Bible, especially when we read of the kings after Solomon, if you were taking a test, and you had to take a test of all the kings of Judah and all the kings of Israel as part of the divided kingdom of Israel, and you had to say bad or good, I'm just going to give you this clue. If you wrote bad for every single one of them, you would get a B. There weren't that many good kings. And so to have the clarifier here that he did what was good and right in the sight of the Lord his God is a big thing. But let's go ahead and read on in verses 3 and 4. It says, he removed foreign altars and pagan shrines. He smashed the sacred pillars and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded the people of Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and to obey his law and his commands. And so one of the things that we find, idolatry has kind of very quickly filtered its way into the nation of Judah. This is the southern kingdom. Talk about that here in a moment. And if you know the history of God's people, there was always a drift and there was always a pull toward idolatry. And so for him to make this like, we're not going to do this anymore, is a huge thing. Let's go ahead and read on through verses 6 and 7. It says, during those peaceful years, he was able to build up the fortified towns through Judah. No one tried to make war against him at this time, for the Lord was giving him rest from his enemies. Asa told the people of Judah, let us build towns and fortify them with walls, towers, and gates and bars. The land is still ours, and we sought the Lord our God, and he has given us peace on every side. So they went ahead with these projects and brought them to completion. Now, maybe not a big thing here, but as king, we see Asa doing something very, very important. Actually, probably about a year and a half ago, because it was kind of leading up to the election in 2024. I read a book, and I can't remember the name of the book right offhand, but it was by N.T. Wright. It's actually Jesus and the People. But N.T. Wright wrote a book on the role of government from a biblical worldview, which is kind of a good thing. But I'll give you one of the premises, which he says, if a government is doing what God has designed it to do, a government will, number one, seek the welfare of its people, and number two, protect its citizens. In the very essence of what government does and should do are those two items right there. And what we find King Asa doing as king is he is seeking the welfare of his people, especially the spiritual welfare of his people, and he is protecting them. He is protecting the citizens. But one of the things we have to realize is that peace did not last forever. We get into verse 10, and we find out a little bit what's going on. It says, there's an Ethiopian king, and he is bringing an army of men against him. And it says, so Asa deployed his armies for battle in the valley north of Marishah. Then Asa cried out to the Lord his God, O Lord, no one but you can help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord, that we have come against this vast horde. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let men prevail against you. Now, there is a little bit here in this verse that I just want to just kind of lay out real quick. Asa is going into war. He knows that he is outmanned. In fact, if you put all of his soldiers together, it's about 580,000, and the Ethiopians are coming with 1 million. So they are outmanned by a lot. And so one of the things that we find Asa doing, though, is he's not freaking out. He immediately turns to God in prayer. He doesn't seek out other nations to have like alliances to help him. He seeks God out in prayer, not as a last-ditch effort. Not as I've tried all other things, I guess I better pray right now. Right out of the gate, before he does anything else, his first line of defense in battle is prayer. So let's talk about something uncomfortable here today, because this is a conviction point. I know it's a conviction point for me, and it might be a conviction point for you. How many times is prayer not our first line of defense? How many times do we face a problem in life and we get into go mode? Guys, we get into go mode. We get into fix mode. We get into we got to get everything right. And prayer becomes an afterthought. And prayer becomes something that we do when our best efforts are no longer working, or our intellect has reached the point where we can't figure out this problem. Then it's like, oh, prayer. And we find Asa, again, right out of the gate, chose to seek God. And what happened is they were victorious in battle. Because he sought the Lord and because God had granted them strength, a smaller army defeated a larger army, and God gets the glory here. But I love what happens, and we're going to go on to chapter 15. I love what happens here, because when something good happens, the natural tendency is for us to say, look what we did. Look how awesome we are. And so we find a prophet coming to Asa. And he says this in chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Then the Spirit of the God came upon Azariah, son of Obed, and he went out to meet King Asa as he was returning from the battle. Listen, Asa, he shouted. Listen, all you people of Judah and Benjamin. The Lord will stay with you as long as you stay with him. Whenever you seek him, you will find him. But if you abandon him, he will abandon you. And what I love is the prophet's message comes right on the heels of victory. And like they haven't even had the victory parade into town where they get to go, woo, look at us, we did awesome. And the prophet is reminding Asa, you don't get to be good. You don't get to be awesome. You don't get to claim this as victory. And the tendency is that would happen is he would get comfortable and he would forget the Lord and he would believe that this was all about his mighty power and his glory and what he has done. And so what we find is Asa listens to the prophet and he doubles down or double downs. How's it? Doubles down. That's the right thing to say, right? To say, we're going to serve the Lord. Our nation is going to be a nation that we're not going to fall into idolatry. We're not going to do this stuff any longer. In fact, listen to verse 8. In verse 8 it says, when Asa heard this message from Azariah the prophet, he took courage and removed all the detestable idols from the land of Judah and Benjamin and the towns that he had captured in the hill country of Ephraim. He repaired the altar of the Lord, which stood in front of the entry room of the Lord's temple. And verse 8 is one of those that, like as I'm working on a sermon, there are certain times that there becomes pain points for me. And the one on prayer was kind of a pain point where I was able to say, yeah, I'm not like Asa in this situation where prayer is my first line of defense. But I see what he does here is I'm going to call a little bit of a secret sauce. Now, there's not like a magic pill. There's not a secret sauce that says if you do this, all will be right in your relationship with Jesus. But this is very good, and this is very necessary. You see, one of the things that Asa did is he got rid of the ungodliness in his country. He got rid of the things that were leading people down the path of idolatry. And that is a major thing, and that's a big thing. But he also made the necessary changes that needed to happen to draw people's hearts to God. Now, some of you are asking, what did he do? Well, he tore down all of the idols, but he repaired the altar that was in the temple of God that made worship of God in the temple a new and renewed reality. So let me ask you this. Have you ever examined your life? Have you ever been convicted by the Spirit, maybe in a sermon, maybe during a time of Bible reading, that you're not nailing it in a specific area of life? Like, I'm horrible at this, and I got to stop doing this. So you make a decision and you stop. You say, I'm going to stop doing this right now, and I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to cuss in a football game. Right? Okay. Too soon for me, by the way. You know, all those different things. And so you say, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. You try really hard and you fail. Anybody been there? Okay. One of the things that causes that to happen is we try to remove a mess from our life. We try to get those messy patterns out, but we fail to replace them with godly patterns. And so what we find Asa did is like, we're going to get rid of idolatry. We're going to push this stuff out. We're not going to let this happen again. But he made sure that the temple was right for worship. He made sure that the temple was in such a state that what people really needed to do, they needed to worship something. And so he provided a path for godliness in this. And a lot of times, and I know this is true of me, and probably true of you, we realize that life is messy, and we realize that we have made a mess, and we try really hard, but we fail to make lasting change because we fail to turn our hearts to Jesus in the process. We try to make it all about us, and making it all about us probably makes things, well, let's just say worse. Then we get to verse 10 and 12, or 10 through 12. It says, the people gathered at Jerusalem in late spring during the 15th year of Asa's reign. On that day, they sacrificed to the Lord 700 cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had taken from battle. And then PETA showed, anyway. Then they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, with all their heart, by removing old patterns and replacing them with new. The people turned their hearts to God. Asa was very serious of this old stuff. This old stuff isn't coming back. And we're going to, in turn, be a nation that turns our hearts to God. And that is exactly what happens. Notice verse 16. Verse 16 says, King Asa even deposed his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother because she had made an obscene Asherah pole. He cut down her obscene pole, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. So he sent grandma to jail. I don't know if he sent her to jail, took her crown away. I don't know exactly what happened here, but she refused to turn her heart to God, and he said, sorry, grandmother, you're out. If you're not going to turn your heart to God, you don't get to serve in this role and position anymore, which seems very drastic, doesn't it? I mean, she's your grandma. She used to make you cookies, right? But instead, this is how serious he is about removing the evil from the land of Judah. And then we get to verses 17 and 18. It says, although the pagan shrines were not removed from Israel, that's their brothers to the north, Asa's heart remained completely faithful throughout his life. He brought the people into the temple of God. He brought into the temple of God the silver and gold and various items he and his father had dedicated. Asa committed his life to cleaning up the mess. And even though he was king, and I want you to notice something here, cleaning up the mess did not come from political reform. It came through religious reform. And listen, we believe, I'm going to say the vast majority of us in this room here today, believe that if we could get the right people in office, we could clean up the mess. Having the right people, the right laws, the right programs. Listen, I'm going to share something that I shared with my wife the other day. And I don't want to be a downer here right now. But I'm just going to say this. It is such a mess. Our political system is such a mess. Unless there is a massive awakening, a massive spiritual revival where people are turning their hearts to God in this nation, it will not transform what is happening in Washington. Because that's not our hope. Our hope is not in political reform. Our hope is in Jesus. And so the best thing that we can do as a church and as a people is not say that if things could happen right in Washington, then all will be right with the world. What needs to happen is one by one and family unit to family unit, we are reaching out to people who are not walking with Jesus, and we help them know the hope that they can have in Jesus. That is our hope, because that is spiritual reform. And so the only remedy for our messy world is not political reform, it is Jesus. And we have to believe that, and we have to act on that. And Asa understood that political reforms may have their place, but the most important thing is turning people's hearts to God. Full stop. Now, as a kid, One of my favorite things to do was on a Saturday get picked up by my grandpa, and then I would go out and sit on the tractor with him all day. I absolutely love that. I'd come home covered, caked in dust and dirt. My grandpa had a little radio, I'm going to call it the pre-boombox. I only had one speaker, and it just kind of, in his mind, only had one thing. It was like AM radio, and we used to listen to 1370 KGNO out of Dodge City. And so they played country music all day, and like old-time country music, not the new stuff that they have today, like real country music. And every once in a while throughout the day, there would be the Paul Harvey commentary. Y'all remember Paul Harvey? And then Paul Harvey would come out with, and now the rest of the story. And so he would tell the rest of the story in another bit later in the afternoon. And so unfortunately what we have here today is in Asa's life there is, and now the rest of the story. We get to chapter 16. And in chapter 16, here is what we read. In verses 2 and 3, it says, Asa responded by removing the silver and gold from the treasuries of the temple of the Lord in the royal palace. He sent it to King Ben-Hadad of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus, along with this message, let there be a treaty between you and me, like the one between your father and my father. See, I am sending you silver and gold. Break your treaty with King Baasha of Israel, so that he will leave me alone. So here's what's happening. After Solomon, Israel was one kingdom. But after Solomon went away and he died, the kingdom of Israel divided into two countries. There was still the nation of Israel, and there was the nation of Judah. And so the people on the north, that was Israel, didn't like the people in the south, that was Judah. And so the king is going to raise up his warriors to go against Asa and Judah. But the reality is, in fact, one of the things that we have to remember is that the last time we see battle in Asa's life, he did not seek help from the outside. He sought help from the Lord. And what we discover here in verses 7 through 9 is this. At that time, Hanani, the seer or the prophet, came to King Asa and told him, because you have put your trust in the king of Aram instead of in the Lord your God, you missed your chance to destroy the army of the king of Aram. Don't you remember what happened to the Ethiopians and the Libyans and their vast army with all of their chariots and charioteers at the time you relied on the Lord? And he handed them over. The eyes of the Lord searched the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. What a fool you have been. From now on, you will be at war. So again, remember, Asa went it alone by seeking God and saying, I'm going to trust in the Lord here. And now we find many, many years later, near the end of his reign, he chooses not to seek the Lord, but to seek help from the outside. Asa chose to forge a path apart from God, independent of God. Now, none of us are leading a nation, I think, right? We're not leading nations into war. But how many times when we are faced with something in life do we forge a path apart from God? How many times do we go our own way? And notice verse 10. In verse 10 it says, Asa became so angry with Hanani for saying this that he threw him into prison and put him in stocks. At that time, Asa also began to oppress some of his people. Instead of repenting, Instead of hearing the voice of the prophet and saying, you know what, you're right. Asa put him in prison. And then he starts mistreating his own people. This is a stark contrast for the man that we had looked at just earlier. But then we get to verse 12. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa developed a serious foot disease. Yet even with the severity of his disease, he did not seek the Lord's help, but turned only to his physicians. Now, please understand that this is not prohibiting doctors. It's not so much that he sought out a doctor as much as what he did not do. He did not seek the Lord. Now, let me ask you this. How many times do you come to a problem? Maybe it's a medical issue. Maybe it's a work challenge. Maybe it's a people challenge. Maybe it's a financial challenge. And we go our own way by not seeking the Lord, not seeking God's direction. In fact, I want to read a verse out of Proverbs. Actually, a couple verses out of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 say this: Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Now, I'm going to suggest something. What we find in 3 chapters are 2 Asas. We find an Asa that is sold out and determined to be as close to God as possible, and not just that, to draw other people's hearts to Jesus. And then we find an Asa who is obstinate. We find a man who is arrogant, and we find a man who is not seeking the Lord. Somewhere along the way, there has been a change in Asa's life where he went from trusting the Lord with all his heart to leaning on his own understanding. And here's what we need to know, and this is our bottom line. We make our lives messy when we lean on our own understanding. And so the story of Asa becomes a cautionary tale that we can move from being sold out and 100% leaning and trusting on Jesus to somewhere along the way, we no longer trust in the Lord. And I'm going to throw something out. The Bible doesn't tell us how it happened. The Bible doesn't reveal to us. The Bible doesn't reveal to us when the switch happened. But I'm going to suggest this. Asa didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm done. Asa did not wake up one day and say, you know what, I trusted God all this time. Tomorrow, or today, or right now, I'm going to lean on my own understanding. I'm going to suggest this because I've seen this happen in my own life, and I've seen this happen in the lives of dozens, if not hundreds of people that I have known through the years. I'm going to suggest this. The Asa's change did not happen in a moment, but in countless moments of just making one simple decision of, you know what, I don't need to pray right now. Or maybe worship isn't as big a priority as it was yesterday. And so what happens, and I'm going to throw a term out here today, is this: spiritual drift. We had a deacon in our last church. His name was Dan. And he remembers growing up in church. But then by the time he was in high school, he remembers that his family no longer went to church. And I said, so what happened? He He said, well, I think what happened is one Sunday we decided not to go to church. And one Sunday became 2 Sundays. And then we went back to church. And then one Sunday became 5 Sundays. And we went back to church. And one Sunday became 20 Sundays. And before we knew it, it just wasn't a reality in our life at all. See, spiritual drift can be a hard thing. And something happened in Asa's life where his heart grew cold. So I want to throw a couple of items out here today, just kind of a few challenges here this morning. And one is this, just with our heads, just something to know. Be aware of spiritual drift. Be aware of spiritual drift and how easy it can happen. How easy, in fact, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. I do trust that God has a long game, but so does Satan. And so he can just incrementally wear us down to where spiritual drift becomes a reality in our lives. But also this, just right now, I'm just going to ask that you do a heart check. Not a gut check, a heart check. Going back to Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Are you trusting in the Lord with all your heart, or are you leaning on your own understanding? That's the heart check. And I'm going to venture to say that most of us are probably going, it just depends on the day. Depends on the moment. But the command and the encouragement here is not to trust in the Lord with all your heart sometimes. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart. And then I want to challenge you with this here today. There's a really big danger of isolation in our culture. Social media, all these different things have just drastically changed how we do reality. And the more we go about this, the more we believe that we can do this thing on our own. And I want to read a verse to you. In fact, as we think about rooted and rooted coming up, I want you to understand that there is a command for us to be rooted, but there's something pretty cool here. In Colossians chapter 2, verses 6 through 7, it says, "And now, just as you accepted Christ Jesus as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into him, and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth that you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness." Now, I'm going to tell you one of the ways that we read the Bible as Americans. When we hear things like, as you accepted Christ as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. We read this and we hear this in our minds as me. That this is me here. I have to do this. But I'm going to tell you that every time you see you in these 2 verses, multiple times, all the verbs here are plural verbs. You is plural. This means that we must choose we over me. I don't have to do this thing alone. In fact, when I choose to go it alone is when I am going to trust the Lord, not trust the Lord with all my heart. It's not when I'm going to lean on my own understanding. And so I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge toward rooted. I'm going to challenge toward small groups. I'm going to challenge you even in your marriage and in whatever friend group you are in with other Christians to understand part of trusting in the Lord is leaning on other people. Part of trusting in the Lord is being part of community. Part of trusting in the Lord is understanding that I need to have wise people around me speaking into my life, speaking truth into my life. You're going to go alone? It will not end well for you. Will you join me in prayer? Father, thank you. Father, I thank you that you have given us stories in the Bible that sometimes are cautionary tales. But Lord, I thank you that you call us to repentance and you call us to change, but you don't call us to do that alone. Part of that is being called into community. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.